Okay, thank you. Good evening, everyone. This meeting of the Coventry Town Council will now come to order at 6:34. Roll call. Ms. Ludwig? Here. Mrs. Shockley? Mr. LeBlanc?
Here.
Mrs. Lima?
Here.
Mrs. Dixon? Mrs. Shockley? Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. You may be seated. The emergency evacuation plan, there are exits in two directions behind us or in front of us, and please do move toward those exits and out as quickly as possible should there be an issue. Thank you. Agenda item B2, further discussion on the strategic planning session from November 13th and November 29th. At the first section, the council and the public listened to Coventry department heads who presented their mission, vision, values, priorities, and plans. At the second session, the council continued the discussion of its priorities for the present and the future. No one can remember when the council actually worked on strategic planning as a team. In the next few months, the council will be making critical decisions regarding the future of our town and will set priorities for spending funds from federal, state, and local sources. This workshop tonight is a continuation of that discussion. I'm going to invite Mr. Marchand, our town manager, to facilitate this meeting and to begin the meeting for us. Thank you, Mr. Marchand.
Thank you, President Dixon. So this is a continuation of the prior meeting. And as I thought about how to kind of get back in gear for the discussion, with the time we have tonight, I did want to give Director McGee and Director Blumenthal an opportunity to cover a couple of points that were omitted from their presentations on November 13th. And I know that the council had some interest in hearing more about them. So I'd like to have them make those presentations first, and they'll keep them brief because really tonight is about the dialogue among the council members to articulate the overarching priorities for the town, what you feel are the however many points, most important points that the town needs to focus on to move forward into the future in the best way possible. And that could be around any number of issues. I worked for a mayor who was told that when he ran for office at the city of San Diego, he should have no more than 3 goals because the public just can't wrap their minds around that. And he took on 10 goals with 2020 vision. And that was in 2000 for 2020. It works. You can make it whatever you want. Just the significance is that these are goals that we can point to again and again with every decision that you make to justify them to the public, to the employees, to the directors, that this is the course we're headed in, and this is how we're going to get there. And as we have that direction to follow by the leadership of the town council, then we can kind of tailor all of our budget proposals and operating methodologies to dovetail and fit right in with the leadership that the town council is providing. So we are a more cohesive and tight-knit organization. So that's the goal. And I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion. I have asked the other department heads present to be here if you have any questions or guidance. There are a number of department heads that I've excused tonight since their operations are consistent and less susceptible to the swings of budgets and capital investments. But certainly any questions you have, we will get the answers if someone's not here to answer them. So after we have overarching priorities, then we can go and revisit the wish list of all the things that we wish we could do, but we haven't had the money to do it. and we can put them into the categories under the various overarching priorities. And then we can prioritize them as to how soon these need to be addressed in 1 year, 5 years, or 10 years or beyond. And hopefully that'll give you a framework to work with, so that there might be something that you really think is important. It may not fall under a specific overarching priority, or maybe it goes across 3 of them. But we can discuss how to fit this into our budget discussions, our capital improvement project discussions, and everything to bring it into one cohesive plan that we can present to the public. So with that, I'm going to ask Director McGee to talk about the resource recovery facility that he brought up first in July, and years before, but we'll start with him, and then Director Blumenthal will talk about her priorities in a more focused manner than she was able to before.
Do you have extra? Thank you.
Good evening, all. If you don't mind, if you aren't going to be able to understand me if I keep that up. As Town Manager Marchant indicated, we've talked about it this past summer. But as you see, this process started back in October of 2017, when we invited or applied for the assistance of Roger Williams University engineering department to come and look at the site we had. And we met for over 2 years to get this in place, between meetings at the university, here at the site, and at our meetings. We made a presentation in front of the council then, but it didn't go anywhere we didn't even get it for a vote. It went to a presentation only, and it pretty much died there. This facility that we're looking for is a municipal storage facility, 3-pronged, as you can see on the municipal collection facility page. No, we're on this page right here, please. It's a 3-part, being the municipal materials yard. Anytime that we have materials that we get out of an excavation, rather than just disposing of it at resource recovery at an expense, we can actually stockpile it and then screen it, and then make gravel or make clean sand, screened loam, or we have recycled asphalt when we do paving projects, and reutilize that so that we don't have to spend as much money for earth materials in our budget. And it helps us to have a readily available source. Right now, through the graciousness of Ms. Blumenthal, we were storing some of the materials up at Central Coventry Park, which is not ideal. And you'll see at the back of that handout I gave you what it looks like. We try to keep it as neat as possible, but it's still taking up space in their parking lot. We also have an area that's at the former landfill, but as that is going to be developed with hopefully solar soon, access to that is going to be less and less. And we took a little corner there. We've got about 5,000 yards of gravel that we were able to screen over the last few years. But that's the reason why we were trying to do this, so we can actually save money. Our yard waste collection area, vegetative collection, right now, as you'll see in the presentation as we go forward here, we're spending approximately $25,000 a year just to transport yard waste to the landfill. And we go over our cap on an annual basis to the point of it being somewhere in the vicinity of $17,500 additional over our cap that we spend. So it's about $42,000 and change that we spend just on yard waste. $42,500, and that's on the third page of the return on investment page of this handout. Right now, we would be able to eliminate, by having this area here, we'd be able to eliminate having to deliver that material to resource recovery, have to pay over the cap, and that savings would be about $42,500, which would give us a return on investment in about 4 years.
That's a year, Kevin?
I'm sorry?
$42,500 a year?
$42,500 a year, and that's at today's rate. Resource recovery is already talking about within the next 2 years of eliminating the cap and charging every municipality that uses it the $25 per ton to dispose of it. So and they've been trying to encourage municipalities to develop their own. And since I've been here, I've been trying to develop a site for the town to no avail. Oh yeah, majority of towns do. We don't. And the third part of this is the debris management area. And we'll see that as we go into the slide presentation. Anytime that we have a natural disaster or storm event, right now, all the material that we collect, you see our trucks going around, we bring it to resource recovery. In the event that we had a national declared emergency, whether it be a hurricane, tornado, FEMA requires us to have an area that can be stockpiled so that they can determine what our reimbursement is going to be. And that includes 2 lookout towers so they can actually see inside the trucks and verify and log what that material in is and what the material coming out is. And you'll see that in here what we're trying to do. So having that debris management area, we would actually be able to take, God forbid we had a tornado that came through here, which is now the way climate change, it could very well happen anytime, anywhere. We have no place to put the cleanup material right now. And this is where that would be. We would put it there, be able to process it, get reimbursed by it, and get it off the site. It's only going to be utilized when we have an event. If approved by the council, it would take between 3 to 5 years to develop with the town forces to go and cut the trees, strip and grub the area. And we'll show that in the design proposal that we have here. This is all designed by the students in collaboration with the engineering department and us. You can see on the cover, the students did an excellent job. All 4 of them were here on a regular basis for that 2-year period. Yes, please.
Well, first of all, have you determined the cost to run this facility? Because we see the return on investment and how much you'll save by not bringing the materials to the landfill.
Right.
But there's going to be a certain amount of cost. And the second thing I would like you to address is that when this proposal came off to use Reed Schoolhouse Road, the neighbors in that area banded together and they were very much against this proposal because of the location. So I'd like you to address how you're going to overcome the problems that they had with this site and also what other alternatives you have looked at.
Well, first of all, it never got to a public hearing for the people to even, this was all hearsay and what was done through one of the council members. when we looked to this determination, you have this page. Cody, can we go to the slideshow, please?
We're on it.
Okay, Ron, can we go to the fourth page, I believe, when it shows the actual map? I'm sorry, it's probably one of that. Proposed site. Keep going. Okay, that's the one. Thank you. If you look to this photo on the right-hand side, that is the site in question. You'll see that little cutout in the middle to the left-hand side. That is the Kent County Water Authority Tower. That long strip you see along the back of those houses, that's a 200-foot wide National Grid easement. The houses along Walker Ridge, as you can see, most of those houses are up towards Walker Ridge Road. Well, that shows the lot lines. The other ones, if you go back, the other one shows actually where the houses are located. Houses are located closer to the road, not to the easement. There'd be almost 450 feet between where the uppermost berm that would enclose this with shrubs on the top. They wouldn't see it or hear it because of the distance away. And this is a town-owned site that's 19 acres.
I
So
think one of their primary concerns was the perhaps impact on the water supply and their wells. I think that's what their primary concern was. Plus, they thought there would be noise from the trucks, but I think the primary concern had to do with water contamination.
once again, ma'am, that may be the fact, but it never came to a public hearing, so that was never brought out. All of the site, as we go off to the next sites, we will actually see there's actually detention areas on the next slide that we have where the windrow areas are, the storage area, and you see that blue line, that's all a detention pond connecting all water. So everything is going to be on site and there'll be no leachate from that area. Okay. There'll be a 6-foot berm that surrounds it, which you can see it's in the dark brown. On top of that 6-foot berm, there'll be 6-foot high arborvitaes planted as a living hedge. So as far as people seeing it, hearing it, the noise and the sound will not be anything to be concerned with. And again, all of the wells that you see there we'll have a test on it. We can do an annual test to make sure there's no contamination. But again, we're going to be collecting and keeping all of the erosion and water on the site.
Mm-hmm.
Can we look at other towns? That's part of why I asked that already. Other towns that already have this sort of facility, and if they're in areas similar with wells, and see if they've had any issue. And, there's ways of let's do our homework. I think even if things never came to public hearing before, the project was not well received. It's funny because District 5 was the last town council member's email as well. So I've seen emails about this just within my town council email. And if we can know the questions and concerns people have and be able to speak to that, I think it would be really important if we wanted to move the project forward.
Absolutely. But the most prevalent ones are in the city, like the city of Warwick has this type of facility also. And a lot of the more rural ones like Richmond, that we can talk to that also. But
Yeah, lots of wells there. I don't know about Warwick.
Warwick doesn't have wells. So.
I don't know if there's any.
Yes. Ms. Ludwig?
Kevin, Director McGee, can I just ask a couple questions? So I noticed on the slide, it says the usable site is approximately 15 acres, but how much do you actually, of the 15 acres, would you be using?
Well,
I guess the brown line around that, I guess.
The town site itself is 19 acres. The area that we would be utilizing would be the 15 acres. But again, you've got a roadway system that goes around it, and you have the spacing with the windrows, and you also have the berm. That's that brown line. That's where the berm is located. So it depends. It's not going to all break out at one time. We're looking at this as putting an area together, developing it, and it's going to be over time that we were able to put that together to save the town
To
money.
get up to the 15.
Yeah, we're not going to be
Okay.
doing that right at one time.
And then were there any other than the near Reed Schoolhouse, were there any other locations considered?
our first location that we considered was at the Pacillo farm. And there was a site there that DEM came out and looked at. We had foresters look at it. But unfortunately, there was a company that's adjacent to that talked to the council person and had it thwarted. So we did not go forward with that. Even though it was on the downside away from where their property is, that stopped. We looked at another one at the corner of Harkney Hill and Phillips Hill, across from where the softball field is. There's a 20-acre parcel there we looked at. And once that same council person heard that we were looking at that site, she talked to one of Resources and had that pulled back from their offer. So if the council doesn't want it, obviously, we're not going to be able to save money for the residents, and council people are the ones that have been putting the kibosh on any motion going forward on this.
What about, I'm not even sure the acreage here, but has any thought been given to developing the back area here? And maybe, so this area that we have back here and possibly relocating the kennels.
Well, that's the greenway that right behind us. Directly behind us is the greenway,
Well,
and we abut it.
obviously, I mean, between there and here, like left to right, has any thought been given to that, or do we not have enough acreage for all that?
There's not enough. That's our public works yard. We have our gate and fence is right on the green path, the bike path, and that's where we start, right to the building. So
Okay,
I'd be
so
happy to put it right here, but there's not enough room. The whole
Okay.
site is less than 5 acres.
So realistically, you have I might say it wrong, the Pacillo farm. I just know it as Piggy Lane, right?
Correct.
Harkney Hill and
Harkney Hill at
Phillips.
Phillips Hill. But that was withdrawn from Water Resources, withdrew that offer once the council got involved.
Reed School, and now the Nike area.
Well, this Reed Schoolhouse is in the Nike area. It's actually off of Nike. It's not on Reed Schoolhouse Road. It's actually on the Nike access road. Right by
Okay,
the
so
water.
actually, so now I guess I'm confused. I know there's at least 2 Nike sites, right? We have one out by the softball, if you're heading to softball fields.
Calvin's Place was a Nike site, but we're not talking about that.
So this one, is there a difference then? So the one you were referencing before about on Reed Schoolhouse, is it the same location that
Yes.
we're, okay.
It's
All
the
right,
Air
I'm
National
sorry.
Guard is up there right now.
I'm sorry. I
Rapids.
thought this was a separate location being, okay. Thank you for clarifying.
Okay, so that's the road the National Guard's on. Okay,
Correct.
I got it.
So it really don't affect anybody other than the backyards of the people on Walker Ridge.
Quick question for you, Director McGee. Would you be needing additional vehicles for this? Would we be leaving them there, or?
There would only be one additional vehicle and it's a piece of equipment that's actually worked into the return on investment, our cost to get started on. And that would be an additional front end loader, a used one that we would utilize for that to be on site.
Okay.
But there's no trucks or nothing else that we would need now.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. McGee, have you developed a budget? Because it will take work to develop this site. If the site is approved, it would take work to develop it. And I'm wondering what the budget is to just develop it into the site as you want it to be.
Yeah, on page 3, where it says the return on investment, if you look about 3/4 of the way down, it says proposed cost to construct the,
Sorry, page 3 of the design proposal.
yes.
Okay.
It's approximately 170,000 in total. And we're spending on average 180,000 for the 4-year period. So that's where we get the return on investment would be within 4 years.
Thank you.
I understand Councilwoman Shockley's concern or question, and I'll be happy to look at that, get a list of other communities that are utilizing these type of facilities in their communities and what the impact would be, if any, on any wells and neighbors.
No, I appreciate that, because just as a resident, my thoughts are, how do we control odor? How do we control animals? This is a composting site, right?
Yeah, I've worked with a community that had exactly this kind of a site exactly like this. And the EPA mandates for Clean Water Act require that the composting be on a impervious paved surface area, that there's drainage to a catch basin. It's all mandated by law. So it's going to be protected. We have environmental regulations in place for that purpose. And we wouldn't be able to do any lesser standard than that.
That's great. Does that make it so that there's no, I understand the ground surface is impermeable, but what do you do to keep animals away and keep?
Well, this isn't going to be like food waste composting.
So we're just
This is
composting yard
just
waste.
yard waste.
Correct.
Chipping and that sort
It'd
of
be mulch.
Okay.
And
grass clippings.
So I'd imagine if it gets that far, the project, I would recommend, and I think we want to do probably a small community meeting like we did for the landfill solar project people. They really appreciate it. I think something like that would probably be really helpful, or even early on in the process before the council even makes a decision. So
Yeah, if at this stage, we're presenting a proposal idea to pursue. If you're interested in pursuing this, we would do the full workup, vet it, and do public meetings and hopefully get it well enough vetted before we brought it to the council for a vote that it's old news.
I'll second President Dixon's question too, of just curious what kind of budget this will need to operate, or if it's just something that pays for itself, or how that works. So I'd just be curious.
Well, again, as indicated, in order to construct it, it'd be about 170,000.
Oh, no, yeah, I'm talking about, yeah.
Yeah, as far as we would ask for any additional people, just that one piece of equipment
Okay.
that we'd be able to utilize.
So the idea would be within the current budget, the budget savings of 45,000 a year would offset whatever operating costs, which I think would be less than 45,000 a year, because we wouldn't be posting one person at the site
Okay.
full time.
Yeah.
They would just be running to the site while they're doing roads.
So this is more just facility
It's a
expansion,
facility,
not
yeah.
Right.
service expansion.
Right.
Okay. Okay, understand.
Can I ask a question? Would it be feasible to set this up as an enterprise fund and not in the general fund?
If we did, I would tie it to the sanitation program as waste management and solid waste management. And then it could be part of the whole sanitation operation. But by itself, it wouldn't have a revenue stream. So it wouldn't make sense to have as a enterprise.
Because any of the mulch that's come up after the yard waste has been, we would offer that free to the residents.
So you wouldn't, okay, so you wouldn't sell.
We wouldn't be selling it, no.
And it wouldn't be grade A compost for fertilizer. It would just be wood chips and mulch.
Okay.
And pretty rough at that, because we wouldn't be investing in the dye lots and whatnot.
Right, and we'd offer that to other departments in the town if they needed it for some of their projects, and we would utilize it ourselves. So instead of going to resource recovery and getting it the plantable soil, we would actually use it here. So,
Mr. McGee, I was not involved in any discussion when the Pachillo Farm area was discussed, and I can understand probably why there was some concern about using that area. But how many acres do we actually own down there? I mean, is there any possibility to put this site down there without it affecting or being near the groundwater?
yeah, the site we looked at was actually across from where the actual dump itself was. It was on the access road going up the hill.
Yeah.
It was a 5-acre site there in between the wetlands, and again, there was no houses there. None of the water there is potable. They've already determined that nobody could drink that water. But when we looked at that, was just for the yard waste collection, was not for this full 3-pronged effect as far as being a debris management area and also being material storage for the public works.
Okay, so the proposal has expanded now to include these 3 components, correct?
Correct, it has,
Okay.
to make it more palatable. And again, this program that was done with the university was also done with DEM and FEMA regulations in mind, so they meet all the regulations. Okay. Again, the slides that you see here just shows the location, what it looks like, and each slide after that continues with the legend showing you where the storage areas would be, whether it be vegetative debris collection area, and that's circled in red. That's about 2 more slides forward, Cody. Yeah, that's the vegetative debris collection area. And again, as you see a lot of these storms that we have quite a few, and we're collecting that, and we're paying to get rid of it at resource recovery rather than being able to put it all into a stockpile area. One thing, slow down going there with a chipper and chipping it all up into chips that we can actually utilize throughout town. The next one is the windrows. You can see the height of the windrows would not be these large windrows of yard waste. We would keep it within the 4-foot height range and keep a machine that would be there, be able to turn those windrows. And once they become completed, then we can utilize them for the residents. And residents wouldn't go there to pick them up. We would actually take them here to our transfer station, and we'd have a stockpile here so that we have the backhoe, so we can load it and get a backhoe load in the back of their pickup truck, and we would provide that to the residents. There would be no additional traffic going up to the site. It would only be our sanitation trucks. The next slide is the finished compost storage area. You can see this, and that's located to the left. It's actually the northeast corner of the property. And the next slide is the material storage area. And we'll have those bins set up so that we can have the gravel, the loom, the recycled asphalt, and all the items that we normally use. And if they're strung between our yard, like now Central Coventry Park, and the landfill area. I'll wrap this up real quickly. The debris management area is in the back corner, which would be very used, hopefully, without any emergencies. We wouldn't have to use that on a regular basis. But you'll see in the front corner, there's 2 outposts, and those are for the towers that would be constructed. And those towers would be constructed so that as the items are brought in, they can be identified to FEMA requirement. And on the exit, taking it off site, they'd also have somebody there to operate that tower and be able to document that for the FEMA reimbursements. The next slide is the earthen berms that will surround. That's the brown that you see. And on top of that, which this doesn't show, this will also have 6-foot arborvitaes planted in a row to create a living hedge on the top. So, and it'll have an access road that goes around. That's the outlined in red. The next slide. Then we have the detention, the drainage areas that are right. You can see what those would be, lightly swaled areas. And that would pretty much be the slide presentation. Again, this has been brought to many people, and hopefully, again, the only site that we're looking at is to try to save the residents money, whether it be through getting the proper reimbursements from FEMA, yard waste costs that are continuing to rise and trucking costs are rising, and also to be able to utilize a material storage area that we can consolidate our product and save money so that we don't have to continue going out to buy earth materials and reduce that from the budgets. Just for your consideration, and I will definitely look at Ms. Shockley's recommendation.
Mr. McGee, I have a couple questions for you. Will the only trucks going to this site be the Department of Public Works trucks, or will we find any kind of commercial businesses going up to that site?
Everything will be just town public works sanitation trucks or public works truck bringing materials up there.
Is there any possibility for a revenue stream to come out of this facility?
That's up to the council. If we develop enough product and the council decides, let's put that out for sale, we'll have some quality tests done on the product. And if it meets the recommendations of DEM and it's safe, and the council wants to do it, I'll be happy to entertain that. There are some landscapers that will buy bulk of this material, and we could look at that and sell it at a reduced price and get that to help offset the cost of operations.
Mm-hmm.
But that's 4 or 5 steps down the road.
That's down the stream. It would take
Yes.
a while for that compost to be ready for landscapers, wouldn't it?
It would take 3 to 5 years, yes.
3 to 5 years.
Now, what I saw in Manheim Township, Pennsylvania, was that they had so much debris that it was going to be really burdensome for the town employees to administer it. But they partnered with a landscaping company that would come in and chip it all. And rather than pay them, they'd take, 70% of the chips away and use it themselves and leave the balance there. And that way it was less work that the town didn't have to manage. And there's a win-win situation. So anything like that we could look at in terms of keeping the operation as affordable and efficient as possible.
And I realize that there are some residents that no matter what we tell them is in the best interest, they'll be opposed to it. But I look at, we have 36,000 residents and we may have, less than 100 that are concerned about it. What's best for all the residents and for all the taxpayers? And sometimes we have to do the best for the many rather than a few or the one.
And with raw material storage like this, there aren't any odors associated with it.
There's not going to be any food waste in it at all. So thank you very much for listening to me. Finally get in front of the council to explain it. And if you so desire, we'll go to the next step. But I just hate to spin our wheels for nothing. If you guys are not in favor of it with all the information, then we can go on to something else.
So this must be about your third council before which you've presented this.
I'm done. I hope this is the last council.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McGee.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'd like to ask Raina to make a brief presentation. As we discussed after the last meeting, we found that, there are a number of her proposals that I had also put forward and maybe overemphasized, like the maintenance garage for the operation of Parks and Recreation. While that's an important component tool utility that needs upgrades to have water and electric, it's not the top priority for recreation right now. And really the entire emphasis is on staffing. And so I'd like Raina to speak to that for a few minutes and then we'll move on to council comment.
Thank you so much. So as of 4:30 this afternoon, my sole recreation staff person went on maternity leave. Although I'm very happy for her, we have no recreation staff. However, we currently have winter programming going on. We have spring program to plan. And this is our busiest time for planning our summer camp, preparing for the beach operations, and also our basketball league, as well as other summer programs. However, those require at least 2 full-time staff to do those 3 summer activities: the beach, the camp, and as well as the basketball. So right now we are severely understaffed. I already had to cancel our February break. To put in perspective, our summer camp in the past has had hundreds of people, up to 500. So that's the same size as an elementary school. So it takes more than one part-time person to plan that. There's a lot of logistics involved. The beach, we don't have in our budget to have a full-time beach manager come on. We didn't have the budget last year as well. So that means that this past summer, we didn't have the beach open. And that was, in my opinion, a liability for the town to have unsupervised beach open. And also meant that we weren't bringing any revenue to fix the damage that was done, that being that it was unsupervised. So my concern is, well, where does the town want to go? Do we want to just, when that person comes back from maternity leave, just continue on the way we have been? Do we just want to focus on the permits for the leagues and that is it? Because right now, we'll be contracting maybe some fitness programs in or out of our schedule. But other than that, we do not have a recreation department with any offerings, just basic. So right now I'm going to have to be doing the programs, as well as my bookkeeper, who already does the permit process and does the paperwork for all the contracts and the vendors. So we are severely short-staffed. Before I came here a little over 5 years ago, we had 2 full-time program people. It was wonderful. I got to bring on 3 people. And then with the budget cuts, it was moved down to 1. So we have been able to maintain that level of service for a year because of COVID. But as you saw last summer, we weren't able to open the beach. So we're starting to see the impacts of being so short-staffed. So I just want to bring that to your attention. So another issue is, sorry. Yes, please.
You presented the story about how you were short-staffed. What is your recommendation? What are you asking from the council?
Excuse me, there's Velcro here. I keep getting stuck. I would like to bring back the positions that we cut due to budget cuts due to COVID. I think if we bring those positions back at the bare minimum, I'm sorry, that's 2 additional people, the coordinator and a supervisor. And if, depending on the direction the town wants to go, I would like to bring on another person, an event coordinator, event manager. Those will be the large scale events. Those can generate more like revenue for the town, more tourist dollars, bring more community cohesion. So at the bare minimum, it would be 2 additional employees, full-time.
So is the request that this be considered as part of the budget that we will be considering this winter and spring? Or is this something that you wanted to have immediately entered into or given you some money that you'd be able to do this?
So-
I'm not sure what the time sequence is.
So, I spoke briefly with the town manager and finance director. I do have, if I'm able to bring on a full-time person now, I will have enough funding to last the new fiscal year. I don't want to hire a full-time person and then say in the new fiscal year, I'm sorry, you have to go. And we will be in the midst of one of our busiest seasons. But I need to know sooner than later, because I also need to bring on some part-time staff to kind of fill the gaps in the meantime, and the money will go towards them.
Really, this is a conversation about what we can do now in the current fiscal year to set us up for the direction that we're going to go in the next fiscal year.
Right.
And the decisions we have to make now are critical and relevant. And so we just want to make sure we're stepping in the right direction, because there's going to be room to make adjustments. And if it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But the ask is ultimately for 4 new positions, because 3 are just to maintain the traditional programs that have always been offered. And 1 is to actually generate more interest and revenue for the department that can kind of fund all of these positions long-term.
So the immediate need would be the coordinator who was laid off, and then a program supervisor would be the immediate need. And then we can grow from there. And then, to do that, I have another conversation after this.
So I see the need, and I think this council could right now say, yes, of course, we should add 1 to 4 people, whatever it may be. We then hit the same wall we hit every year. We can tell you, we think this is completely necessary. And when it goes to budget, it can be cut. So it ends up being the same problem every year, and what makes strategic planning hard. Every year we work to put forth the best budget possible for the town. And every year it's not really up to us. And I'm just mentioning that as the problem that's going to keep hitting us and hitting us and hitting us for the rest of time based on our current situation.
You're fine.
Thank you. If you want to wrap it up, then we can move into the council conversation, because I think this is a really good segue into the council's overall arching priorities of how we're going to go forward, how we're going to address these long-term needs. I think from,
Yeah, so I actually just presented the town manager with a memo asking for a comprehensive municipal-wide master plan for just parks and recreation. So the last 30 plus years, we will decide to do one thing, but there hasn't been a clear direction or plan or any kind of needs assessment with the community. So to go along with the staffing issue and where this department will go moving forward, I think it's important that we assess the current levels of service and facilities compared to the community needs, not just their wants, but their actual needs, and have a master plan be used as a guide for decision-making about our parks and recreation offerings. Maybe we just are offering summer camp or just doing the beach, or are we offering more comprehensive programming? And then provide a rationale and framework to fund specific capital projects. Is it important to invest $500,000 on a townwide playground, or should that money be used to fund other capital improvements? So I think that's something that I'm going to propose in the budget to the town manager. I think that will help us move forward in a positive direction.
Just for a glimmer of hope, in working with Director Crossman and the Affordable Housing Authority, Julie Letty, the town has not been availing itself of all of the CDBG grants that it could be eligible for. And that is a pot of money that we're going to go after with a vengeance that could actually pay to rehabilitate or replace the community center itself as a building and with a newer structure that meets the needs. And to the extent that we could get CDBG funds and other grant sources, Parks and Recreation is one of those departments that is very conducive for lots of forms of grant money that other departments aren't able to get. And so as we put together a strategy going forward, there may be ways that we can offset and supplement parks through grants to move it forward. But I've never advocated as grants as a method for funding a budget because they require matches, they require investments, and they're a pain. But they can advance your goals in a win-win situation if you're very strategic about it.
I'd be curious to see, I know this isn't a full-on budget discussion, but I'd be curious to see the estimated cost for some of the pieces of equipment you talked about that would help keep the fields better maintained to higher quality that you mentioned, because to me, we heard last night about how there's this professional soccer complex coming into town. And then, if we have fields that are of a caliber where private leagues are fighting to play on them and the turf is appropriate and, they're measured correctly and, lined correctly, and you have that, and then say you have an events manager, can you imagine a weekend here in this town where you have professional soccer tournaments, you have baseball tournaments or lacrosse tournaments, and then someone's maybe planning a farmer's market or an event. I mean, if that's a weekend in this town, that's huge.
I mean, the issue is, and that's kind of the issue of not having a comprehensive plan or a master plan, is that also things are just put in kind of haphazardly. So some of our fields are not to the right specifications.
Yep, you mentioned that.
We don't have lights. We don't have water. So the fields we do have those monies. They're maintained beautifully. And actually the traveling leagues are actually fighting with the local leagues for that space. So there is definitely a need. And we had to do some strategic planning with the permit process to actually accommodate everyone. We're at the point now that the leagues are already kind of, for lack of a better word, fighting for space.
So would you say as well that we need more facilities, more fields?
Absolutely.
Oh, really? Okay.
Absolutely.
It's good to know.
I do fully support that we do an assessment as quickly as possible and develop a plan, because every time we feel that we need to make cuts in the budget, I believe your recreation department is one of the first departments that is cut.
Right.
Because it's not clear what the value is. The community members have not articulated the value of Parks and Recreation for them. There are some leagues, of course, there are some summer programs, but the vast majority of the people in town, I do not think, avail themselves of what you are offering. So we need to determine not only what they perceive as their needs now, but what we might be able to offer to them that would be of value going into the future.
Exactly why I think a master plan is needed.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
What is CDBG?
Community Development Block Grant. It is a federal program that is federal money. There are rules and stipulations, but a lot of those funds become more accessible as you have low to moderate income areas. If you're not a low to moderate income community, you don't get an automatic grant and allocation, but even any community can draw a boundary around a specific census tract to identify it as low to moderate, and you can target funds to go in those areas. But even for larger communities, there are other sources of CDBG money.
And the people that administer these grants, they're looking to give the money away. It's like they want you to take the money. So I think we really need to push to take advantage of that.
Yes.
There's a lot of other cities and towns that have regularly, because it's every year you apply, regularly take advantage of this money. And this is big time money. This isn't like, oh, $5,000, $20,000. It's like hundreds of thousands of dollars we've been missing out on.
All right. Thank you, Raina. I've listed in kind of my notes agenda some ideas for overarching priorities and other discussion items, but I'll just let the council kind of lead their own discussion in terms of, and if you'd like me to take notes on the poster paper, I can do that. I have note cards and pens where I can pass those out if you want to kind of brainstorm and put ideas under the different overarching priorities. But let's start with what are the most important priorities for the town, and get a list going there.
CIP plan. I know that's vague and broad, but we need an overall plan in place for what sort of money we want to be putting aside for this on an annual basis, beyond just projects. Like, what are we willing to actually invest?
Well, I think he's looking to see, what does this council prioritize? Yeah.
I know, I'm just saying there's the overarching thing. Where are we willing to invest?
So planned expenses would be under a financial stability, financial planning kind of a value priority. So,
Could you use a black pen because red is hard to see?
sure.
Thank you.
Can I just ask, because it was mentioned earlier, this is supposed to be a conversation amongst the council. How is this supposed to go? Is this a raise your hand, ask for permission to speak situation, or is this a have a conversation?
Perhaps we can waive the rules.
Yeah, I'd vote to suspend the rules.
A free-form conversation. This is a work session, not a formal meeting. We won't be taking any votes, so whatever works for you.
I'd like to start with some high-level items. I don't know if you want to call it goal or whatever we want to call it, but I think a lot of us have talked about transparency to the public, and whether that means records retention, reporting, technology. You know, where is someone in the queue when they put in a request into DPW? Just calling in and knowing where to even go. I think that's an area that I would like to discuss how we can possibly prioritize that goes across multiple departments. I think that's a theme that we could get covered through many different areas of the town.
Are you speaking of technology or
Transparency.
No, I know. It
So-
just sounds like a lot of it has to do with having better technology for being able to see,
Possibly,
reach
yeah.
out better.
Yeah.
I think that transparency, I do believe that being transparent is very important, although I think we really need to talk about what that word means because we use the word often. But I think that transparency maybe builds into trust. And the more the voters trust us, the more they'll be willing to support us at the polls. It's the support of the budget, support of various decisions that we make. So we need to think about how or what can we do to build up that trust among the voters so that they understand why we're making decisions and what kinds of decisions we are making. And so whether they agree with our decision or not, they understand where that decision has come from. So transparency, I do believe, is very important, but to me, it's part of building up the trust for the community members.
And I think that all comes from positive experiences. And I think there's some low-hanging fruit when it comes to the town, such as modernizing some processes and streamlining some processes. So for me, things like getting the ability for you to be able to make transactions more seamlessly on our website or be able to find things easily. I think that's really low hanging fruit that, we should be hitting out of the park in 2022 in a world where we've had internet for decades. And even little things like I've seen a lot of people complaining about getting dinged with fees when they pay bills online. That's something we should find a way to either absorb or eradicate for them as we move forward. So I would say there's a lot of low hanging fruit in modernization because I think there's some antiquated processes we have in town.
I agree with you that there are low hanging fruit, and I'd like to sort of put these in a couple of categories. There's low hanging fruit that's easy to do and it's very low cost.
Yeah.
And should be easily able to, assuming there are resources and people, we should be able to do these things as soon as possible if we can identify them. But then there's also things that we need, such as modernization of databases and processes. And some of this is going to take money, and we have to determine how much money we want to put into that. So, that leads me actually to financial health and stability. How do we put ourselves in a very stable financial position so that we then are able to make some of the decisions, even to tackle some of these low-hanging fruit areas? So financial stability to me is extremely important because that translates again into tax rates for taxpayers, et cetera.
I think, this sounds too broad, but the common thing we kept hearing last night and some of the things we've heard in our notes for use of ARPA funds is infrastructure, roads, how things look in town. People, I think there's, pride issue, facility issues, the school buildings, obviously. I think, that's a very high level term. I think you have to dive into that deeper and decide priority from there. But people frequently bring up infrastructure when they talk about the town.
They do. They're looking at parents. I've been in towns that have like 3,000 people.
Yeah.
And in the summertime, there are just a few flowers. Just when you go down a street, no matter how short the street is, there seems to be pride in the community. The streets are clean, the sidewalks are clean, people are strolling, you see flowers, You see blooming trees. And you come into our town, you see nothing. The best kept area now is the Rotary at 117 and 102. And that's because some volunteer group is working on it. But the whole appearance of our town does not lend itself to a pride. If you've all gone out and collected on, what is it? What do you? Earth Day, yes. I couldn't be surprised. I was so surprised at how many nip bottles there are and other kinds of things along the road. Even in front of my house, I'm finding them now too. But that's just a small thing, but it does.
It's like you said, it can be small things like at the community center. I almost tripped and fell because of some cracks in that parking lot. And the thing is, if you just resurface that, it makes things look better almost instantly. And it's one thing that you can do. But you're right. But I think, I would imagine with infrastructure, we have to, I don't know if that's tonight that we dive in deeper, but, and decide priority within infrastructure, but.
We'll get into infrastructure deeper, the capital improvements plan.
Yeah.
And project by project, and we can get as specific as the costing and everything else. But I think it's really helpful to bring it up tonight in terms of exactly what you're saying. If you have a clean, overlaid parking lot, people are going to have a more positive association with their visit to the facility than if it wasn't.
Just from last night's meeting as well, I'd like to bring up water conservation projects. It was brought up a lot from different people from different water areas in the town. And I think it's something that hasn't really been on our plan, but with the issues that we're having with our ponds, I think it's a really important thing to make sure that we're planning for.
And again, it's another opportunity for economic development because I'd love to see Tyoke Lake used for an event similar to a water fire, or at Christmas time, people pull out their boats and decorate them with lights. There's so many communities in coastal Connecticut that do things like that. or Raina, I know has mentioned people being able to rent kayaks and canoes and go out and fish. So I think when we preserve those, we also give ourselves the opportunity for more economic development.
So we have so many ideas here. I mean, there's low hanging fruit, there's high hanging fruit. There are projects that don't cost too much money. There are projects that have very significant financial burden on us. I mean, how do we go about making some decisions, and how do we go about prioritizing? Do we need to set up some criteria by which we would judge some of these projects so that we can make some decisions and inroads and say, okay, this is where we start?
Some of the things are naturally going to determine their timeline, I would imagine. So an example, like Kevin's got the project with the robot thingy that's examining the sidewalks and the roads. We shouldn't, in my opinion, do anything to fix roads until we fully get that report. So that's something, it's like you can't prioritize that because it's not something immediately actionable. So like, I think some things on this list flesh themselves out.
Well, that's really a part of a project. It's the beginning of a project in order to determine our priorities, correct?
Correct.
How far along are we at?
There was a TA taking the sidewalk scan.
Good.
We should have a report within the next couple of months to be able to come before the council with the process about where we look for the capital improvements.
Mhm.
Which for many years, I put in for $1.5 million, which sounds a lot, but really not.
Yeah.
It's only $250,000 per district for roads and $50,000 per district for sidewalks. Now it's just districts that don't have sidewalks, we put it all into roads. We spent nearly $500,000 this year on just 2 roads.
Yeah.
Well, 2.5 roads.
Mhm.
So you have to get a lot. You may only get 1 road done in a district in a given year, but it's motion going forward. And unfortunately, right now we're just dealing with the most catastrophic streets where we should be looking at it maintenance. So we're doing crack filling, we're doing micro sealing, so that we don't have to get to that large. Then it goes over rather than recommend.
And we can plan for that, right? Because it doesn't matter which streets right now, we just have to plan for the money to address it. So we'd have to, I think this goes back to your CIP plan suggestion of, what do we want to prioritize on an annual basis? And then what are maybe some of the separate items that are maybe bigger projects that might fit separately into a bond or something like that?
Can I comment on how to possibly handle some of these CIP items that we haven't been able to get into budget? So I think we can break them down in 2 different ways. We can break them down in the capital that we're going to purchase, items that we're going to purchase that are smaller, and then some that we're going to finance over a 5-year term. And we could easily get 2 million, 3 million a year in CIP if we do it that way.
So give us
that's one way to look at it.
I'm sorry, Ms. Mills, could you give us an example of what you would put in the purchase category and what you would put in the finance category?
So what I'd put in the purchase category would be furniture, fixtures, computers, leasing, capital. They're all capital leases, so we retain the asset. But like a vehicle, it's 3 years. Currently we're buying police vehicles in 100% totality in one budget, and that's a big chunk. So if you spread that over 3 years and the equipment over 7, in the same life as how it's depreciated, or slightly lower, so you're always ahead of the game. So that's how I've done it. And every municipality I worked, I've never seen this place is a little bit unique, that the CIP is all done in one chunk and everything spent like almost for cash, right? We did the first financing, I guess with Capital One this year, and all that equipment for DPW, and that was $200,000 a year. So over 7 years, so we're able to get some much needed equipment for DPW.
So you said there were 2 categories for CIP, purchase and finance.
Correct.
What's in the second category, finance?
Well, the finance would be those items that are 5, 7 years,
Okay.
and also it would add to the road improvements too. So you'd want to try to do that over a certain period of time, right? So if you want to do so many roads, how many roads are deficient, kind of do a projection of how many roads need to be addressed in the next 5 years, and then address it that way and spread it over that way. And that would be a fine. That typically cannot be financed unless we do those loans, but the capital assets can be financed.
Can I mention the infrastructure bill as well? There might be federal money coming in. We do have these funds from ARPA. So possibly prioritizing right now projects that we don't have to budget for the entire thing based on either ARPA money or federal money we might be able to get from the infrastructure bill. And I don't know much about the infrastructure bill, but as we know, they're looking to do projects in our area, or we could apply for funding for those projects. And therefore it's not all coming out of our budget. I think that's a great way to create a priority.
The infrastructure bill hasn't been defined yet, but obviously as a town with a lot of needs and not enough resources to meet them, we're going to avail ourselves of every federal dollar that comes our way. So I think for me, what I'm doing is I'm kind of interpreting from the comments that have been made into kind of these strategic values. When we talked about the transparency and the customer and the services and the accessibility and trying to create a more positive governmental interaction experience for the resident and the taxpayer, it's kind of all bundled under government services. You have to have a strong financial position in order to run a healthy organization to pay for the services and the goods that you're providing. And so that's, you gotta have a thing of health, budget, you're bringing in more revenues than you're spending for now. And so you have this financial efficiency strength kind of concept. From infrastructure, that's the backbone of your municipal services. It's the roads, it's the sewers, it's the things that people take for granted and cost the most. But if you don't have them, everybody complains about them. That's really expensive to replace. So that's kind of on one level, and facilities, buildings, parking lots, playgrounds. It can be all encompassing. It kind of bleeds into beauty and aesthetics because the view, a brand new road is beautiful. Everyone loves driving on it. It's a good experience. But from the beauty and aesthetics, and what President Dixon was saying, people really like to see the hanging flower baskets and the banners on street poles and the manicured gardens and benches and public art, which is nice and is appropriate in some places. And so that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. So how we interpret these into a value or overarching priority that you think we need to pursue, and those are the suggestions. Maybe it is beautification. We want a beautiful, clean community that makes our residents proud. We want quality infrastructure that's stable and sustainable. I've heard also people talk about protecting the water resources and the environment and having a good conservation program. Certainly the materials management center that Kevin talked about tonight would go under that category as well as our stormwater management programs and that sort of thing. Economic development being related to all of these things. Are we on the right track? Is this what am I reflecting back and forth?
Yes. But I mean, most everything requires resources, time, people, and money. And when I think about money, I'm thinking about the financial strength and stability of our town. And the burden cannot be on the taxpayers because they've already rebelled and they say, don't put the burden on us. So I think that we need to have a discussion either tonight or soon about what we can do to improve the financial health and sustainability of our town. And, I need sort of expert guidance on what we can do. But we need to look for new sources of revenue, and we need to look at ways to decrease expenditures And the new sources of revenue can't just be on the taxpayers because they don't want to be called upon again and again and again. So, I mean, I think a whole discussion on financial stability and sustainability is extremely important, and that looks at expenditures and it looks at revenue sources.
Right.
I don't know if people have any thoughts on that.
Do you guys have any thoughts?
I think that's, I think you hit the nail on the head. So, I mean, seriously, I think that's most overlooked, is looking at other sources of revenue. And from my perspective, we are getting into the procedures and pulling that stuff out of miscellaneous income that was, no one really knew what it was. And it's starting to filter to the proper departments. So we can see truly what departments are bringing in some revenue planning, obviously, and, police, et cetera. But I think the biggest gap, in my opinion, is recreation. This is a nice rural and urban town combined. There's plenty of walkways. You could have, it is an endless opportunity here for cross-country races, building a skating rink, the dog park. It is endless here. The amount of revenue you could bring in, it needs to be, I guess, prioritized and organized and properly staffed, and have really a game plan of where you want to go as a town council. Because my thought, and that really adds to the attraction of people coming in and living here.
Well, I think I told some council members this when I was in high school at West Warwick. The Rhode Island Interscholastic League, when we had track meets, they used to say all the time to my coach, I wish your track was built to regulation because you're centrally located off the highway and you guys have the skating rinks and you have the field house right there. So that when they say state meets or state events, they mean the states is putting money and people are coming from all over the state to your town. So I 100% agree with what your sentiments.
Just of that presentation last night that Russell put together, just the private corporation coming in here, seeing the opportunity to bring in 2 soccer fields. That's great that doing that. And I think it's awesome. That's our opportunity as well to reduce the tax burden on the taxpayers and really look at there's a lot of things we can do that doesn't cost a ton of money. It just needs a commitment and basically projecting out what we can do. Like I said, I just think this place is, this town, it's exceptional, rural and country. And it's, we haven't really done a lot on the recreation side. Obviously it's been cut, budgets have been cut there. And it's, from my perspective, it seems like it's been deemed like the bottom budget to cut, right?
Mm-hmm.
So instead of looking at it as an opportunity, I see it as a huge opportunity to bring money.
And what other sources of revenue have you potentially identified? We have to reduce the burden on the taxpayers. That's absolutely critical.
I think most every source of revenue, even let's just stick with the recreation department,
Sure.
will require some sort of monetary investment by us. So, let's take the summer program, which I think is the best value for a resident of Coventry I've ever seen. They go on tons of field trips. They have the issue of, if they don't want a field trip, there's nothing to do there. It's hot. You're in the sun. People plan events, but kids are kids. Could we put a splash pad in our recreation area? I don't know if there's room. I'm just saying, because I know in Warwick, if you go to the Y, people pay to have birthday parties. They pay for events at the YMCA, which we could have those events here, charge people to utilize the facility, make it private to them for that period of time. And I think that this is a way to bring in revenue. You would have to build.
I was talking to the town manager about this. I've actually met with playground consultants, gone to other communities. And, initially we were thinking maybe at the old police station or other more central area, and there was DEM grants. The problem is that I didn't have that 20% match, nor do I have the time to commit to it. I can only essentially do one project at a time, being that I have no staff. So, and it's sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm operating, yeah.
And it's hard to get ahead.
Right.
I think the purpose of this
Right.
strategic is
Right.
There's almost
Right.
nothing we can't do.
Exactly.
We can do everything. If we're going to make decisions that we think we could make a revenue generating project out of a splash pad or an ice rink or a roller rink, whatever it is, then we need to design, I live in one community where the splash pad was free, but the picnic shelters next to it were hot commodities for the birthdays and picnics and everything else. And you have one that kind of seats 50 and one that seats 10, and that way you have bigger and smaller groups and a lot of revenue coming in. But all of these things are going to take an investment. And kind of to Mrs. Shockley's point earlier, that we're always up against this wall when it comes to the budget of our 4% cap, having anything for CIP, having anything for contingency after we get done with all the department spaces needs to continue to do here. So as Director Mills and I worked through the financial structure of the town, we've identified some potential opportunities where we can take existing municipal resources and steer it towards that investment without disrupting the budget flow. But it's a calculated risk. Now, usually they say government shouldn't get into anything that business isn't getting into because business isn't getting into it for a reason. But when you have a proposal going to build 2 sports fields and make money off of that, we're perfectly positioned to participate, compete, collaborate, whatever. I was in one community that had 5 soccer fields, 1 tournament field, and 4 practice scrimmage fields, and it was booked and travel leagues and all multi-state kind of teams. It's just that level of investment. So I think to the revenue standpoint, that is a high priority, but there aren't any easy low-hanging revenue fruit available. It's going to be a commitment that could be seen as risky, could be criticized by members of the public that don't have the vision or the understanding of what it is we're actually trying to accomplish. So being clear on our vision of why we're focusing on these priorities and how we're going to get to this revenue piece while promoting beauty and aesthetics and services, they all go together.
It sounds like we have to have money to make money. That's typically how it goes.
Can I ask?
You get to tax the money you need, but we're kind of taxed out. So,
Can I ask if we can go to private investment as well? So for instance, talking about the skate park, the Washington Trust funded a lot of that. So I think it's the YMCA and the Washington Trust down there. It's not, I don't believe it's a town ice rink, but I'm just saying it's community investment. So the local bank, which is operated out of Westerly, put a lot of money in to invest in something for kids to do in the winter and adults alike. And so is that something that we could look into doing? Coventry Credit Union, something that kind of takes pride in a business that takes pride in this town as well, that could help invest in something like this. And kind of to go along with that, the old Almax property, is that privately owned? Yeah. Well, because I know its big issue is that it floods, right? So a skate rink might be perfect.
It's owned by Stop and Shop.
Oh,
Boy,
so no one could
so
use
no
it?
competition could go in.
They did that in Richmond too. It's so ugly. But they might love to sponsor an ice rink for us.
I think there's an opportunity to explore those kinds of corporate sponsorships, GoFundMes, public-private partnerships, but you're only going to get any traction if you have a commitment going in. If they don't think you're committed, they're not going to commit.
I would like to, before we try to think really, really big. Focus on what we can do better on what residents actually experience with our town. And what I mean by that is our sidewalks are crumbling. I mean, I get a lot of emails. I forward them on to you guys. Our roads definitely need help. We almost lost our transfer station. We need to make sure our trash collection happens on time and the machines are there for that. Parks and Rec, I really want the beach open. I mean, I got so many complaints last year, just like neighbors and friends, like saying that the beach was closed. So, but I know that was partly because of COVID. But playgrounds around town, I mean, there's like nothing we're a bedroom community. I know playgrounds can be somewhat expensive, but a small one's a swing set somewhere. Like, I mean, if we just focus on those things first, before we think of a skating rink and a splash pad and everything else, I think that's most important. And one thing I've always requested is from Mr. Wazika, from the previous finance director, was a 1, a 3, and a 5-year plan. Like, I don't want a bond to come to the town council unless it's on a 3 or a 5-year plan. Like, I just think it's kind of ridiculous if it's not on a long-term plan that this town has been planning for. Another example I have is we didn't have a plan for the old police station yet. We had years to think about what we were going to do with that old police station as the new one was getting built. I mean, it's still just sitting there right now. And like those type of things, I think that needs to be where we focus first. And then we can think of all these great big plans. But that's just my point of view. I just want to take care of those simple touch points.
I agree with the sentiments that there are a lot of immediate needs that carry a lot more weight with the residents in the immediate neighborhoods. And the only exception I would have to that is if there is if you can buy the goose that lays the golden egg, then you buy the goose, and then you have the golden eggs to pay for all the other things that you wanted. And it's building that revenue stream up for that future capacity to do, all the things we're supposed to be doing. So that's the only reason I consider talking about an ice rink or anything that's going to be a cash generator more than a burden. I would never do a swimming pool because those are always cost losers. They're very expensive to run. And there's also a community expectation that it's going to be subsidized and more affordable than the YMCA or whatever, because their tax dollars are paying for it. And the reality is the total property tax revenue equals the school department expense alone. So everything else the town does is not on the property tax. If you cut it that direction.
Right.
Obviously, it's not cut that direction, but to help people understand that it takes a lot to run a municipality and a school department combined, and we're at pains to do it. Now, I think there are efficiencies we're going to find as we refine our process. We kind of institute policies so that on the operations side, the staff can start working more efficiently, then we can maybe save some marginal costs on the operations side. But to get to the investment in the infrastructure, I don't have a clear vision of how that's going to be achieved. I'm hopeful that we can find ways, and that with grants and other opportunities. But I think thinking big is what strategic planning is all about. But you can't forget the nuts and bolts of why we exist. That's something I've always tried to balance, that strategic visioning doesn't lose sight of our day job, and that we're here to provide the services that we provide every day, and we can't stop doing that to go to the ice rink. So thanks for that balance.
I do agree that we need a 1, 3, and 5-year plan, and I think that's why we're doing some strategic planning. But I also think that we were elected because people expect that we will provide a vision for the community. Where do we want the community to go? And the voters may not be able to articulate immediately what their vision is. They want the road fixed. They maybe want a flower here. They want the trestle bridge painted, but they might not have that long range vision that we are here to help develop. I mean, I think that's part of our role as a council, and that is to look at that vision and try to articulate it and then provide the journey, the road to that place.
I agree, but we also have to think about the finances associated with those.
Well, I was the one who put
As well.
financial schedules.
Understood. Again,
I'm big on that, yes.
understood.
Yeah.
So I know this conversation isn't about COVID money, but it's obviously a part of how we can do those more immediate needs. So, as I look at this and see a lot of what people talked about earlier, which was transparency, so people have more trust. I don't know if it's just broadband that you can use the COVID funds for, or updating any sort of computer systems, databases. I'd reached out to Cody because in West Warwick, you look at the agenda and you can go to a point in the meeting on YouTube. So instead of us having to say it hour 2, 2 hours and 33 minutes in, if you want to try to get to that point to listen to the one thing you wanted to hear at last night's meeting, you can actually go to the agenda, click on that agenda item, and it brings you exactly to the place on the YouTube video. And the person I spoke to thought it cost about $6,000 a year. Cody's already reached out to me to, look into a couple of things, but these are some things that could help people be more engaged in our town
For the
government.
fact that we require people to mail in a handwritten application to apply for boards. It still
Right.
says on it mail to. I mean, some people type in, but you get the point.
As simple as that.
Yeah.
Like
Online submission form,
making it
yeah.
easier for people to, when I'm here in this and I can fill it out online and immediately submit it to you, then I did it instead of thinking about it and not having a printer on hand. And even for paying for items online. And I do find it more efficient. I'm not sure what can be done about the fee, but even just being able to do it, if that's your choice, and making it so that for on your end, Ms. Mills, it goes to the right account, or it's labeled in such a way that it's easy for you to allocate it.
We have our new software for the tax collection, and now you can do ACH and credit card online, and there should be 2 separate buttons out there, basically mimicking what Portsmouth has done. And Portsmouth has the same thing, except with the videos. And you can go to the actual agenda item, but except for it's on Portsmouth's website as opposed to YouTube. I think that's even more convenient. But I do agree the technology, I think is super critical for transparency. The ease for the taxpayer, little things can be done with, including the website. I think Mr. Marchand had brought that up when he first got here about our website. It needs a little work. Just fine tuning that and the transparency with the possibly new software would make a huge, I think, difference in satisfaction to the taxpayer. I really do, because I'm going into our particular website and I don't find it super easy myself. And I'm fairly decent with technology. So I do agree that technology, we're eliminating right now manual things that we do with pieces of paper. We're still with a day off. We have to fill out a sheet and stuff. And that's why we need this one on our list on the finance side is we need new software. We need this particular software that can handle the HR function and can handle timesheets. People send their timesheets in electronically. They're approved electronically. They go into payroll electronically. We are doing so much manual work that I just think time could be better spent trying to look to find revenue to generate revenue instead of constantly filling out pieces of paper.
So e-service is all part of that government service. We'll get cost savings and efficiencies, but it will take an investment in the technology to get there. As far as the fees, the town doesn't collect any fees. We're just passing on the credit card transaction fee, not the credit card company charges. I've been in places where
the town eats those and subsidizes the cost for the resident, and that's a really helpful thing. Until we're in a better financial position, we're not there yet, but that would again be a policy decision.
As long as we're still willing to accept a check, I don't think I'm willing to eat that fee, because I think people don't notice it on their smaller charges because it's not as large a fee. Kent County, if I wanted to pay through credit card, would charge me quite a large fee for my water bill in comparison to what my water bill is. But if ACH is also another option, then they have plenty of options for how to pay their bill. And if that efficiency of a credit card is worth a certain amount of money for them, I think that's phenomenal.
I just want to piggyback off. This is hyper specific, but I just wanted to say it anyway, off of Jamie's point about the day-to-day things. I think I saw in the chief's presentation back in November about a couple of vacant specific positions, and one of them being like a traffic specific person. I think you mentioned as like a traffic officer or something.
So if we were fully staffed, we'd possibly look at having a traffic officer for the department. It would be somebody that be also trained in commercial enforcement and would handle like complaints of certain areas and things like that, be dedicated time to that.
Yeah. So as someone who has probably the most urbanized section of town, half of my constituent outreach is traffic, whether people are speeding, accidents, blind spots, the school. So, and not to mention, I think you have to think about the public safety piece as you expand offerings and invite people into town. So when you have these private events or you invite people to large scale events, I'm not sure you guys probably have the capacity to send as much detail as probably needed if we significantly increased some of the events that would require it. But I'd say as one of the low hanging government service things, I'd like to consider something like that focuses on traffic as things continue to get busier and more congested on the east side of town.
Not sure whether to make a new point for traffic.
It's
Well, I
really
will
specific, but I just,
Right.
it's like I said, 50% of my constituent outreach is about traffic issues.
Well, and it's funny because while it seems specific to you, I live in the neighborhood near the high school. So traffic and speeding is actually one of my biggest issues as
Yeah.
well, even though it's not as congested an area. Kids flying down our roads.
Yep.
And at the same time, we want them to be smoother and nicer. So,
Yeah.
you can't win.
No, you cannot win.
And not to mention, I've had this conversation with Russ and Ben on more of a planning scale, is how there's only one way in and one way out of this town. There's not many outlets to get in, whether it's Route 3 or 117. It's kind of like it's very congested on those two roads. And of course, because of the roots of our town, our roads are smaller than they're probably supposed to be. And so that makes it tougher too with planning. But yeah, I'd say traffic's a huge constituent concern that I get for safety in that respect. I don't know. I've lost count of how many times I've requested a speed study from Chief Ice. I mean,
They don't always get you the answers you want.
no, they don't. And then I show them to the people and they say, oh, their equipment's not working.
That's true.
A person's individual experience.
There's two people with hands raised.
All right. So, yeah, I mean, it's always very subjective in the eye of the beholder of what their personal experience was in one moment of time that they want to generalize. All right.
I didn't know if you wanted to have this is public comment.
Well,
We're not into public comment.
we're not having public comment, and we can wait until the end. I'll defer to the council. This is the council's discussion.
I'd like to continue if we're on a roll to continue the discussion, but certainly allow ample time for public comment.
This is also hyper specific, but I'd like to see the town prioritize marketing and communicating about itself. We don't use our town's Facebook page, and I think it'd be nice if just a couple times a week we said, it's sharing DPW's posts or Park and Recreation's post. It's talking about, hey, did you know you can pay this bill online now? Or here's the council agenda for tonight. Or this committee is meeting tonight. Or Anne always does announcements about vacancies on boards and commissions if the town posted frequently about what's open. Or I just think it's kind of archaic to me that this Facebook group with 20,000 people is ruling our town's communication when we have it in our power to do that ourselves.
I think communications is largely a staff solution. And I have a couple of opportunities to explore with the potential hiring of an assistant town manager. And I'm looking at, with some of the staff changes that are happening currently, I have opportunities to look at kind of other ways of doing things than the way it has always been done. And I would love to find a way to build a communications coordinator component into the staff without adding a new position. But I also came across an opportunity to hire an intern. I would love to have a long-term internship program for the town where we can kind of benefit the state of Rhode Island for building a pipeline of future municipal department heads and managers. But interns are a great source of the research and analysis that I did in college and I do day in and day out, but I don't have time to do so on the scale that this town has. So that's a concept that I'm exploring, and hopefully we can develop to address that. But some of these things are going to be a direct investment, like the website. We don't have a quote. We started the process of getting one last summer, and then that was put in the parking lot for a lot of other reasons. And hopefully we can build that into either the next 6 months or the budget to come up with a communications plan for a better way of disseminating information and allowing the website to be a forum for communicating and interacting with the residents in a more efficient manner.
I've also, thank you. That's interesting information. I noticed on the agenda that you passed out, most of the items we've touched on in some way, but we haven't used the S word yet, schools. And
There are two S words.
The 6-letter word.
Yeah.
7.
But
Schools.
yeah. But I would like to bring up the topic of schools because we have not actually mentioned that word at all this evening, and just get a sense of where we feel this fits into strategic planning. Thoughts by any member of the council?
My interpretation was I just automatically included schools under our infrastructure high-level goal.
Mm-hmm.
So any large projects I would consider falling into there. So roads, school, anything that will require large investments, I consider that falling under the infrastructure goal that was listed before.
It's kind of, thank you. It's kind of easy for us to talk about roads because we all have roads in our districts, et cetera. We all have schools too. It's easy to talk about roads, but roads are within the purview of the council and Mr. McGee, et cetera. Schools involve another large department, which takes up quite a bit of our budget. And so how does the council look upon us developing some kind of a plan, maybe collaboratively with the schools, so that we can see some kind of improvement in the delivery of education in our community, because that's what draws people in. They like the bike path, they want clean water, they want a nice beach, they want leagues to play in, et cetera. But schools do bring in communities and communities of people.
Well, that was a large part of my remarks the night of the vote, was that we were looking really just in front of our noses and not at the entire bevy of facilities. Like, all those schools are 50 plus years old. So I do agree. We need something very comprehensive.
With all due respect, though, the committee that
I'm not
Put
gonna,
up-
I'm not
no,
gonna
just
debate
really
the
quick.
bonds,
with,
please.
with all due respect, the committee put 2 years of thought into all the other schools.
I'm not in trying to insult them.
No, I
my-
don't think so.
my-
I just wanted to be clear.
My point simply is, yes, it is a high priority, and I'd like us to consider a plan that expands decades.
I mean, at some point, I would like the council to really engage in a conversation as to how we would like to, in some way, collaborate or set expectations for the schools so that we can begin the process of building to improve, because we need to do that, and we can't wait another 5 years or 10 years to do something. I'm not sure what that something is, but we do need some kind of group. We need some kind of people. We need some kind of discussion. I don't know what it is, but where are we going on our thought process regarding schools? And I don't want it just to be lumped into infrastructure, because it is part of the infrastructure. It's a valuable part of our community. But how do we want to approach this to get the ball rolling, to get the train moving again?
And make sure we get our state funding.
I think that's a wonderful point. And you can't really plan for schools without the school committee.
Correct.
The way the entire governance system is designed, the town council is responsible for a lot of things they have no control over. And if you're not on the same page with the school committee, they're your partners in governing a big part of this town.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, that solution does need to be a 10, 15, 20, 30-year plan. And it needs to be holistic. It needs to be inclusive of all schools and maintenance and everything. And that really hasn't been part of the conversation. And it hasn't been on a big enough scale because it hasn't included the council, the finance, the town treasurer, town manager, and all of the members of the school department that are involved. And while, there have been efforts in the past to do something, it's not happening at the right level to get a vision and a direction to say, this is what we're committed to as a community. And I think that's where this town needs to get to. Mr. LeBlanc brought it up on the 20th as well, that we need to have an inclusive plan that looks at all the schools and all the infrastructure holistically, because we're one town, one tax base. And, it's too easy to get stuck in the furrows of, well, we're in the municipal services furrow and they're in the education furrow, and they don't cooperate, they don't communicate, they don't work. And to a large degree, that's the system design that was designed by the legislature and the state. But I think with the commitment of the taxpayers and the elected officials of Coventry, you can bridge those differences.
The good news is, Anne, I think it was established many times in our conversations when we're talking about the project, is that nobody in this group disputed need. And so I would say that I'd love to really talk about, I'm sure there are pieces that projects we can do without having to go to bond. So I'd like to I'd start that conversation soon, knowing how long a bond process takes.
And we thank you for that support. And I think we also need to engage in a very active, proactive discussion with the school committee to determine what their priorities are and how we may work with them to move forward. So we just have to figure out a way that we can, I guess, renegotiate and restart those conversations sooner rather than later.
I'd like to add a couple comments. I think Mr. Marchand said exactly, we need to bridge the gap, okay? There's definitely, they're over there and we're over here. We do need to bridge a gap, and the transparency and the trust needs to be built. And there's a little bit of ways to go with that. And I do believe there should be a 3, 5, and 15-year goal with all these schools. And in those goals, there should be the possible reduction of 3 schools, 3 middle schools, 3 into 1, and the other 2 remain in the new middle school, and obviously a new elementary school for the combining of like 3 that we can consolidate. I think consolidation and cost reduction, I understand that they looked at it. I didn't see the numbers. I don't see any number crunching on that. I'm not going to dispute whether they did or did not, but I think we need to have that transparency. Okay, where are those numbers? I find it hard to believe that we cannot consolidate some numbers, have literally 3 really nice schools, and that will be a huge draw, instead of just one.
Well,
And
I'm not suggesting that we jump to conclusions or jump to some kind of final decision here this evening. I'm just suggesting that we need to begin the conversation again, whatever that conversation looks like and with whomever it is. I mean, we still need to work out details, but we do need to include a discussion of where the schools fit in the grand plan and vision that we have for our community. That's really critical for us to do.
I agree. And they're 69% of our budget. So if we don't look at that, and we're sitting here wondering where we're going to get the money for this and that, and you need a new school, they're crumbling, there's mold, there's this or that. The cost reduction and looking at those numbers need to be transparent in that 3 to 5 year, 15-year plan. And I think it's
We need the, I don't mean to interrupt.
It's okay.
But I'm gonna,
Go for it.
in my personal opinion, I think we need some direction from the school committee.
Yes.
What I'm hoping to see is, I know they have a meeting later this week.
Yes, they do.
I'd like to hope that they can come together with some suggestions on how to move forward. And personally, I would like to sit down with them and figure out a path forward. I do think the schools piece is a large part. I don't think we should be solutioning tonight or doing any of that. I would like to hear from the school side as to an idea on how to move forward. Because I think we have several people here that are saying we understand a need. We're interested in where and how this could go. But I think first I would like to see some direction come from them to say these are some things that they think we should consider.
I believe it's part of their agenda, but we'll have to see. We'll listen in on the meeting.
I'd also say as a newer, I've been here for a year now, but as a council member, getting to listen to each of you, give your needs, where you're lacking, where you look to move forward, approving things in your budget. And I can hear it out of Ben and Lisa as well. It's easier to approve things when you understand why, when you understand how this need came to be or what the path is going forward. And I think that's where the conversation, with the school is just going to be helpful in understanding how they got there, what the need is, and how, what the vision is going forward. So I agree.
Okay, was there another S word? I think someone said there was one and one S word. I'm just breaking the ice over here. Yeah, thank you.
I think it's really by the absence of saying sewers and looking at all the things that we have in front of us, I think that also says a lot. The fact that no one has even brought it up. So I know sewers are a huge part of our infrastructure. So at some point we have to discuss them in here. However, if we can agree on a couple of these very high level goals, we can keep going down and seeing what that means. So I don't know if we need to get into a sewer debate tonight, frankly.
And honestly, the largest constituency that I've heard about sewers in favor of is growing with the Tioga Lake Association. So, in which they testified last night about ARPA funds. So,
And I think that's why we're not talking about sewers, because the town council and the sewer subcommittee is making forward progress. You've given me authority to hire an engineer. You've made recommendations for changes to the sewer ordinance, and there is ARPA funds to help with solving some of those problems. So I think the future is bright for sewers, but there's a lot of legwork to do before we get to know exactly what that's going to look like and how it's going to be done. But I think that's the advantage of strategic planning. To Mrs. Shockley's point earlier, had we done this strategic plan for the town 2 years ago, there'd be no question about where the ARPA funds were going 6 months ago, because we would already have our priorities very well defined and we'd know how to pay for stuff. So we're a little behind the 8 ball, but it's never too late to start. Now is the present. It's a gift. We got to make use of it. And we're going in the right direction. So I don't know. I feel like we're getting to a natural conclusion of the conversation. If there's anything else anyone wants to bring up, we should bring it up. Ultimately, I'd love to hear the council kind of put into a concise statement their priorities. Like, okay, we've talked about a number of things tonight. I don't know if you're ready to prioritize saying first priority is this, second that, or third, but we can at least say, if there's going to be a top 3 or a top 5, this would be on that list.
Do you mean a level down from what we have as the 4 on the yellow side? Or is this the level that you're looking for?
That's the level I'm looking for. Because they're going to be overarching in terms of providing services and stability for long-term government success for Coventry.
So just to make sure I understand them all, government services is basically how can we serve you better? How can we be more efficient, more transparent, more modern? Financial strength is what can we put money into that may become either cost neutral or be a revenue resource. Infrastructure is just what one would think, fixing our sidewalks, roads, buildings, parks, and then taking schools out of an infrastructure and just saying, that's one of the priorities in the plan. Thanks.
I agree with all those, except I would like to expand financial strength, because I look upon it as improving the financial position of our community and its sustainability. And so that looks at revenue streams, and it also looks at cutting expenditures, but I see that as one thing that we would do in parallel with something else. Maybe it's the infrastructure.
So over time, with financial strength and readiness, what we're going to be bringing before the town council over time are financial policies, so that right now we don't have any, but the town council could adopt financial policies about a fund balance policy, a debt issuance policy, that you would decide ahead of time what your maximum debt limit is and whether you're going to go up to 80% of your debt capacity or never above 70. And these are things that are better to think about ahead of time before you're in the position, so that when an opportunity is in front of you, you have some context to judge it by. And that's not to say that your policies are set in stone, but it would be really helpful to have that guidance. And all of these policies are the foundation of what make a great municipal budget. And when you have a great municipal budget, you can get the GFOA budget award for having a distinguished budget, a quality budget that's a good communications piece, a good policy piece, a good reporting piece, and on all these elements that we really don't have right now. I've gotten the GFOA budget award for every budget that I've been involved with in every prior community. And to my own chagrin, I couldn't even write the transmittal letter for the current year budget because I was so swamped. I started it, I have a draft from June, and it never went anywhere. But for me, that's the definition of a strong financial position, where you have healthy fund balance, good plans for your capital expenditures, your schools, and everything that's involved, and you know exactly where you're going. And that gives you peace of mind so that you can make decisions with confidence, so that when you do have unexpected dumpster fires and vehicle accidents and whatever, you have a contingency plan in place to respond, and you're not agonizing over it quite so much. So that's the whole picture of a strong financial plan and foundation. But I think that does encapsulate most of what we've talked about. I can roll in communications under government services. And so there are tiers below these overarching priorities. And I think Councillor Shockley articulated it very nicely. And I'll probably go back and listen to the recording to get it exactly right.
So what you're saying, what I hear you saying is that financial position, financial strength, et cetera, we will be working on that through the development and acceptance and approval of policies. And that's going to be parallel to some of the other priorities that we will set, which are listed there.
Yes.
I'd say, Anne, I think you asked to go kind of drill a little bit deeper. And so just two things. One, on financial strength. I think this is a council, and I'd say any other person based on common sense likes projects that have positive ROI, and also say, like Kevin was saying, the Rhode Island Resource Recovery is probably going to change their rates and we're going to get slapped. So anything that looks ahead like that to try and defray potential costs, and then in the long run stops that cost and is a potential revenue generator and pays for itself, to me, those types of opportunities make sense. As far as infrastructure, again, forgive me, because I was sworn in the day we were supposed to vote on a budget. So I wasn't as in the weeds with you guys on the budget process, but I'd be interested to hear from our departments, the low hanging fruit pieces we talked about and the kind of the basic things. Like, I keep going back to it because it's one example I know that Rain has mentioned is resurfacing a parking lot at the community center. Like, it'd be nice to hear when we talk about improvement planning like that, even things that teeny, I'm not teeny, but you know what I mean? Not the 0 to 100 of, I don't want to see in any CIP this year, a skating rink or, like big things like that, like little teeny things like that would be nice to see.
The ranging deer herds of Coventry have grazed all the low hanging fruit 10 feet up.
And the turkey's got them before that.
Yes, that horse is starting to smell. I understand, but I if there's a synonym for that phrase, I'd love to hear it. So
obviously, we're going to work on a pragmatic basis.
Yeah.
I try to be as pragmatic a manager as possible and go for the simplest, most effective solutions. I think the dynamics I can introduce for solving problems in Coventry are not going to be the big flashy ones, but it's going to be, I saw this object lesson once that was really powerful. It was kind of like you have all your wants and your needs represented by your wants is a bag of sugar, and your needs is a carton of eggs. And you had to put all of them into one jar. And if you dump all the sugar in first, you're never going to fit the eggs in. But if you put a few eggs in first, some sugar, you can pack it all in there and the sugar fills in all the spaces, and you can do everything that you otherwise didn't have time to before because you just had to sort your out priorities and fix it in. And so the one example I've shared before would be addressing sanitation, not as a tax funded program, but as a fee for service program, and relieving the tax funds that are going to that program to put into infrastructure. It's existing money. It adds a cost to the people who would be paying those fees for services, but it's commonly done that way in most parts of the country, and maybe we can't afford not to do it that way anymore. But that's a big policy shift, and I don't take it lightly, and I don't take it without deep concern and respect for the residents. But these are the hard decisions that we're faced with trying to pack all of our eggs into the jar with all of our wants. And we just have to find a creative way of getting it to work. Any other comments? All right. Well, when you're done talking, you can open it to public comment. Okay. But I'll take this as a summary. I commend you for your sticking with this and having the extra meetings. And I know it's taken a while, but it's well worth the effort. It will be super helpful to me, to the department heads, and I think it will be beneficial to the residents and to yourselves as we make these decisions in the future.
One other comment I would make is, as you look at that list, you might look for opportunities where we might be able to form some ad hoc resident groups that could help work on some of these projects.
Yeah, I think there was Director Blumenthal is bemoaning the fact that we don't have a booster club or friends of whatever to help support various activities and goals. And certainly I saw with the Upper Dam Pond, the town gave them permission. I gave them permission to put a fundraising thermometer on the public right of way so that they could get more attention for their efforts, and they met their goal. And we could certainly do that with any kind of a community dream. Maybe we just pick one thing and we want to have a playground funded at a park. In Springettsbury, when I first got there, they had issued a $1.5 million bond to build a 2-mile road and an $800,000 playground that was going to be the destination playground for a 150-mile radius. And it is. And so that kind of level of investment, yeah, it's a bond, it's money, but it's that vision of knowing where you want to go and what it's going to mean to your community and everyone that comes to the community.
Thank you. Are there any final comments by members of the council before we move to public comment? Is there any member of any department head here who would like to make a final comment? We're all set? Okay, I'd like to open it to agenda number C, public comment. If there's any member of the public who is on Zoom who would like to speak, please raise your hand. There are a couple of hands there. And so could you let Pauline in, please? Good evening, Pauline. Thank you for hanging tight with us the whole evening. State your name and address, please, and state your comment.
And unmute, please. You're still muted, Pauline, if you could unmute.
Yep, let's go. We'll go to Mr. Manair. Mr. Manair, please state your name and address, please, and make your comment.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, Larry Manair, 170 Richardson Road. I don't know if this was mentioned because it was really hard to hear a lot of the conversation, but in terms of a new revenue source, I haven't heard any mention about getting a lot more development in the town that would bring in more tax revenue. And I understand that that's a double-edged sword, because if you suddenly have another 500 houses in the town, you're going to have to provide the services and the schools and so forth. But I'm curious as to what the council's opinion is as to development, because if you are and want to encourage development, then the usual thing to do is a build-out analysis to show where the developable land is, so that the developers don't have to scramble to find it and develop in projects and so forth. So what's the opinion on that?
I'll take it from a technical administrative standpoint. And my assessment is that development in Rhode Island does not pay for itself. It actually costs the municipality, because the incremental tax revenue is constrained to the 4% increase limit. And therefore you roll back the taxpayers' tax rates and the town doesn't see the money. And then you're providing more services with less dollars over time. So the more development you have, the faster you bankrupt the community. And that's just the unfortunate way the tax structure is designed in Rhode Island.
Thank you, Mr. Manair.
Can we ask, Mr. Manair, Were you also talking about bringing more business in, not just building more houses?
Anything that will produce additional tax revenue.
Can you add this to the top?
No, the business is all part of the property tax cap. If in Rhode Island you had access to other tax revenues like sales tax or use tax, then or that could be a beneficial revenue.
Yes, if it was, we do get 1% of meals and beverages for the restaurants, but that's the only sales tax we get with a share from the state. So for another restaurant coming in, there's an 8% sales tax and 1% goes to the respective town. So that would be the only increase, and typically it's, obviously 1% of their gross receipts is pretty small, but that is some additional revenue if we bring a bunch of restaurants in.
Thank you. Okay.
Excuse me, there's one more thing I'd like to mention. I did check as to whether there's a quick and dirty way to inform all of the town very easily. And I checked with a reminder, and for $600, you can put an 8.5 by 11 page between the first and second sections of the reminder, which goes to every residence and business in Coventry. So if it costs you about $300 or $400 to print that page, then for $1,000, you could send out a notice to everybody in the town very easily. Every week it goes out, but maybe you could do it once every month or whatever. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Menier, and thank you for all the volunteer work that you have been doing to help map out all of the valuable resources that we have in town. And I know that you've been in communication with Mr. Crossman and provided some charts and tables that you have produced. So we're looking forward to your continued support of the town and all the work that you do. So thank you.
Thank you.
I see that Pauline is still on. Pauline, did you wish to speak? Raise your hand. Okay, I see no other hands. Okay, the public comment is now closed. May I have a motion to adjourn at 8:41, please?
So moved.
Thank you. May I have a second?
One second.
Thank you. Roll call vote. Ms. Ludwig?
Yes.
Mrs. Shockley?
Yes.
Mr. LeBlanc?
Yes.
Mrs. Lima?
Yes.
Mrs. Dixon? Yes, 5 yeas, no nays. The motion is adjourned at 8:41. The next council meeting is January 24th via Zoom for all of us. Thank you.